As part of an Atlantic Council project in 2012, I worked with a group of people on a group project, and that was to investigate the future of the Atlantic Alliance. So the alliance between Europe, 26 members of NATO, and Canada and the United States, NATO. And even 2 years ago, this is well before the Ukraine crisis or Crimea, to try to advocate a strengthening of the NATO alliance, a very firm U.S. commitment to internationalism, to leading the Western alliance, the need for a stronger German role, both militarily and politically, in NATO, the need for France and the United Kingdom, two very strong countries in the alliance, to continue to be strong militarily, and the need for the alliance to look towards Turkey, the only Muslim country in NATO, to make a major contribution in terms of its leadership for the future. And so this was an attempt by a number of us, this was a group project of the Atlantic Council, to draw attention to the fact that Europe is still vital for the United States, that NATO is our primary military alliance in the world and it needs to be modernized and strengthened for the future. We weren't anticipating, I wish I could say we had a crystal ball, I had anticipated the events of the early part of 2014, but I think the report is highly relevant 2 years later because of the situation that we're in now, with President Putin having invaded and annexed Crimea, with the destabilization of eastern Ukraine, with the need for NATO to strengthen itself and make sure that we can meet our commitments to our eastern allies that lie close geographically to Ukraine, such as Romania and Poland and Estonia and Latvia. Well, we, a group of us, I was the project chair, Damon Wilson, the executive vice president of the Atlantic Council, Jeff Lightfoot, who was a staff member. We traveled to Europe. We interviewed senior officials in allied governments in the United Kingdom and at NATO headquarters and other parts of Europe. We talked to a variety of officials in Washington in the national security leadership. We tried to get a sense of whether these leaders were committed to the future of NATO. Of course they were. What they thought the major ambitions of NATO should be, what the major challenges were. And we tried to argue in the report that at a time when the United States, of necessity, was focused more on Asia and the Middle East, we had to retain the sense of being a global power, and that we had to remember that Europe is still vital to the United States. Europe's still the largest trade partner of the United States. Europe's the largest investor in the United States. And we have more allies in Europe by treaty, 26 in the NATO alliance, than we do in any other part of the world. So it was an argument that while the Obama administration was in a way right to say that we ought to be pivoting towards Asia because of Asia's huge importance for the future of the world, we shouldn't forget the American interests in NATO and in Europe itself. The main findings were that the United States had to make a better effort, a stronger effort, to try to rebuild NATO for the 21st century. The United States had to make sure that it was front and center in leading the NATO alliance, number one. Number two, that we needed a stronger German lead in Europe for NATO. Germany is a country with extraordinary economic strengths, doesn't always take the lead politically, has not always worked to strengthen its military, has a very low level of defense spending as a percentage of its gross domestic product, and we called for a stronger Germany in every way, a stronger German military and stronger sense of German leadership in the NATO alliance. Number three, we called for the United Kingdom, our great ally, to maintain its military strength because there have been severe reductions in the defense budget of the United Kingdom over the last several years, and we wanted to see those reversed, and we wanted to see the United Kingdom continue to play the unique role that it does in global affairs. Fourth, we argued that France should continue in an Atlanticist direction. What that means, of course, is France has had an off-again, on-again relationship with NATO over the last 40 years, and that France had finally decided to join NATO's Integrated Military Command just a couple of years ago, and we hoped that would reinforce France's commitment because France is a powerful country with a very effective military. And fifth, we thought that there was a greater role in the alliance for Turkey, because Turkey's been a member since 1952. It has a very large military. It plays a unique role in global politics. It's a bridging country. It's Muslim, it's a secular country, it's also a democratic country. And so we thought that Turkey's influence in the Middle East, in the Balkans, and Central Asia was a force multiplier for NATO, and that Turks should be given leadership positions within NATO that Turks had never had before. Those were the core recommendations that we made. Well, it's interesting. We wrote this report as part of an Atlantic Council group project in the spring of 2012. And now here we are 2 years later. And I think that the findings of this study, that anchoring the alliance between the United States and Europe is fundamental, that NATO has a real future in U.S.-European relations, those findings I think have been, proven to be true and well-founded, because we now see a true crisis in Europe. We see Russia invading another country and annexing part of its territory. We see Russia fundamentally trying to weaken Ukraine and destabilize it in the eastern part of the country. This means that we've got to modernize NATO for the challenges ahead, strengthen our commitment to the NATO members, and really draw Europe, the United States, and Canada more closely together as a result of this crisis. We're not back in the Cold War, but certainly Cold War passions have been unleashed by Putin's aggression, and it really does underscore the need for the United States and Europe and Canada to strengthen the NATO alliance politically and militarily.